We're back. Suzanne, let's talk about advisors in transition.
Okay.
What are some of the reasons advisors change practices?
Well, that's a very good question, Linda. I speak with advisors almost daily who are coming from either the perspective of I need to have a new place to go to, and I'll ask them what is it that's happening with their situations. So what's very, very common is in the broker-dealer environment, some advisors start off in a firm and have been there for maybe 10 years, 15 years, and what happens are everything keeps changing. The rules keep changing about paperwork, what clients have to sign, what you can help clients with and what you cannot help clients with, investment-wise. What types of changes are happening now with the Department of Labor rules and how that may impact how advisors have been doing business. They cannot do it the same way anymore because now the compensation is changing. Another thing that is occurring is there are changes of what's called payout that affect how much advisors have to do in production, how much they do in commission to bring in new assets, whether it's bringing in assets under management or actually being able to charge fees for different investments. The way that they are compensated is constantly changing, and they are feeling more and more under pressure as a result of it. So 10 years ago, maybe there was much more that was being compensated to the financial advisor, whereas now 5, 6, 7, 8 years, 10 years later, that same type of investment has much lower amounts that are going to be paid to the advisor, or they have to just completely change how they're helping with investments and do something completely different from what they did 10 years ago. So because there's constant changes, that is leading people to rethink how many more times should I keep making these changes, or how many more times do I need to maybe keep reinventing myself at the same firm, whereas if I go in an independent space or as a registered investment advisor, I can look at doing things more for my customization, for my preference, and I'm not put under this grid change. It's called the grid when they determine how much you're going to be paid at the broker-dealer firms. How much of this will I no longer need to be affected by?
So what's the most challenging thing, do you think, when you transition from one type of firm to the other? What is the biggest learning curve?
Well, there are a couple of, I'll call them challenges that have to be overcome. I have several people who I've spoken with at particular firms that don't want to make a change to another type of firm. Maybe it's on the same, what's called system or platform, but they don't want to have to change the paperwork for the clients. So the paperwork is a huge, huge challenge that sometimes advisors are very uncomfortable with making that decision. Should I go to a completely different firm which has completely different paperwork and uses a completely different system? That means that they have to get completely new sets of paperwork and have all of their clients sign the new paperwork to be able to move all of their clients to the new firm. So that is a huge, huge hurdle. People get sometimes so stressed about it that they won't do anything. They're like the deer in headlights. they just can't move. So helping to overcome the challenge of the work it's going to take to get clients to sign paperwork is probably one of the biggest challenges. Another one is learning new systems and learning new ways of doing the day-to-day business. If you're used to working with one system and you go to another firm, they're going to have new software, they're going to have new ways of putting the investments through for processing, they're going to have new ways for processing any kind of servicing requests, any kind of retirement requests, all of the things that are going to need to be done every day, all of the technology changes, all of the software changes. So it's learning basically from the start a whole new set of things to do just to do your day-to-day business.
What about the custodian of the assets? Is that another challenge for people, and how do they identify what custodian they want to use if they have a choice?
Absolutely, that is a huge, huge question. A lot of the custodians are selected when they're the larger custodians. They're almost, in a sense, more familiar. There's a lot of advisors who may be on one of the big three, Schwab, TDA, and which is TD Ameritrade, and Fidelity. Those are the three biggest custodian platforms that a lot of companies use when they're going into an independent RIA situation. So a lot of times they'll have colleagues or people that they can speak to and ask, who do you use and how do you like them, and what are some of the things I should be thinking about, and how do you structure your business, and how well do the clients get to use the software? If the clients have a login, is it user-friendly? Do they need a lot of help? These are all things that are going to impact their decision on how much help are they going to need in order to be able to transition, and what are some of the main things that they should be aware of before they make a decision and they impact their clients in a transition.
Now, Suzanne, what about retention? You talked about advisors with deer in the headlights. What about clients that know that you're leaving the firm? Is there pushback from the parent firm or broker-dealer or wherever they were? Is there a somewhat loss of clients that want to stay with the familiar rather than follow the advisor? And what's been your experience with that?
Well, having the clients go with the advisor is always the ideal goal, and that is why advisors when they finally make the decision, should I move, will my clients move with me, is at the top of the list. And it's a very stressful time for the advisor because they really do have to make some hard decisions. But typically, if they are coming out of a broker-dealer environment, there is something called protocol, which is firms that have an agreement that if everyone knows that advisors are going to be moving from one firm to another, most of the large firms have a protocol agreement that the firms have certain lists of things that can be done when an advisor moves from one firm to another, and they will not have legal charges pressed against them. That's one of the things that advisors do look for when it comes to making a decision and making sure that they're staying within protocol in order to move their clients over. Do firms like it? Of course not. Do they want their clients to stay? Absolutely. Clients are relationships driven. It's a relationship driven business. So advisors typically have the solid relationship with the clients, so that's typically what is the goal, to keep the especially the larger clients, with the advisor so that they can make the transition together. Absolutely, there have been times when clients may have indicated that they would go, but they don't. For maybe one reason or another. Maybe they had a bad experience, or maybe they decided they just don't want to take the risk with a new firm or a new name or something they're just not familiar with. So that is certainly always a possibility. And how much help that the advisor gets at the new firm, the new platform, the new location where they're going to, with transitional support is a very big piece which will help them to be more successful or not.
So that brings up an interesting question. If you're going to your own RIA and you've got clients at an established firm, is there a gap while you set up processes and procedures, or are you wearing two hats for a while, or what's the timeline look like for that?
Yes, there is certainly a gap, and it's very important to try to bridge the gap as much as possible when it comes to transitioning from one firm to another. And there is no perfect solution, there's no silver bullet, and there's no crystal ball that says exactly here's how long it's going to take to transition from one to the other. That time period is what I like to call all hands on deck. You have to be ready to make your full effort to contact your clients, to get in front of them as needed for appropriate paperwork, and to keep the communication very high between what clients are doing in the transition process, where they're at, and how things are working on the processing and operations side. It is a it needs to be a very dedicated and focused effort, and a lot is happening at the same time. So it's probably not a good time to plan a vacation. It's definitely not a good time to maybe try to do other things separate from the transition period, because it's really a very dedicated, focused time to be able to just make sure as much can be done to bring over as many of your clients as possible, and to help them to feel very comfortable and confident with the new firm, the new setup, the new office, the new phone system, the new login, everything that's changing. The clients need to be made sure that they are in good hands, the relationship is still in place, and they know what to do. Call, ask questions, be direct about it if there are questions or concerns.
So if somebody was planning to leave the firm, and you said that it's often because they're unhappy where they are, how do they identify what's going to be the right fit for them? Is there some homework that you give them if they come to you for an answer and they don't have a solution in mind?
There's always everyone has a different situation. There's never two situations that are identical. When I speak with advisors, a lot of the time they are in flux for themselves first, even before we can have a conversation about where to go. So it's very, very often, I had a conversation this week with an advisor who was just trying to make a decision about whether or not they're going to continue at the firm and partner up with another advisor in the firm, or if they're going to make a decision to move forward separate from the firm. And it's kind of a dance that people do in their heads to say, well, there's an advantage if I stay, but it's better if I go. And that's not the conversation about where to go. So my first suggestion is always Be at peace with your decision first. Are you going? Okay. If you're ready to go, then you can take the next step. But if you're still not really sure, first make sure you're in a good place. You've made that decision, because then the work that has to come next is really then about matching up what's best for you. What is your style of working with clients? Do you meet clients out at their homes? Do you have clients come into the office? Do you prefer to have mutual fund investments? Do you like to have your money managed outside? Do you manage it internally? Do you do financial planning? Do you do more insurance? You know, what is your mix? What is your style? And once you can really start to focus and narrow down on those elements, that's when you can then begin to look for, well, what other companies do these kinds of offerings the way that I do my business. And that's when you can start to look at, do I want to go RIA? Do I want to maybe be an independent broker-dealer? What's the right mix for me? And then the last piece is, do you want to wear all the hats? Or do you want someone to offer you help with some of these areas of managing client relationships? Maybe you don't want to invest the money. Maybe you don't want to be the person to put the portfolios together. You want someone else to do it. Maybe you want to spend more time doing financial plans and less time doing other types of work. So maybe you want to focus more on planning. What is it that you would like to see your business do more of and less of things that you don't want to do? So that way you can start to at least design a better situation for yourself and not just find yourself doing the same thing just at a different location. Maybe getting paid out higher fees, but you're still having very long, exhausting days.
Any last tips for an advisor considering a transition?
I would strongly suggest having a conversation with advisors who they know who have made transitions themselves. Have an opportunity to just ask questions. Even if it's not that you're considering to go where they went to, it's more about what were some of the things that happened to them, what were some of the surprises that they didn't anticipate happening. And they always can certainly reach out to someone who has information about working with other firms. They could certainly reach out to recruiters or financial services firms that just talk to advisors about, are you thinking about making a change? They can be very helpful in just asking questions or certainly being able to be a sounding board to your situation.
Suzanne, thank you so much for this really valuable information. I really appreciate your time today.
It's my pleasure.